All right, y'all, what is going on? Robert Sykes coming back at you with a contest prep update. This is for week 23 of this vlog series. Let's dive into the macros, the nutritional manipulations, the refeed, peak week tweaks, some posing footage, and a little comparison rounds between me and the other competitors from this past weekend's competition in Utah. So, starting off with the macros and the weight and all that good stuff. So this is week 23. Like I said, I started the week at 155.8 pounds. I'm actually going up a little bit in weight. That's just fluid. I was traveling this week, so pretty self-explanatory there. As far as cardio goes, I have bumped that up for the first time in a long time. I've been doing 20 minutes at level 15. I decided to up the ante a little bit and do 20 minutes at level 16. Level 16 is a whole other beast than level 15, let me tell you. But we got it done, did 2 days a week of that at level 16. As far as the macros go, I've maintained the 125 grams of dietary fat, dropped the protein down another 10 grams. So I'm at 170 grams of protein a day now, and then about 15 grams of total carbs, which puts me at 1865 on the calories. Now, what that looks like from a macro standpoint, I've got a typical day pulled up here. I'm doing 4 tablespoons of the Nut Pods creamer in my coffee now. My one and only meal consists of 4 eggs, 220 grams of egg whites, 14 ounces of ground buffalo, and then 1 Bell's Brownie Keto Brick. I'm doing, as far as electrolytes go, I've kept them pretty constant. So I'm doing 2 packets of the hydration still, putting the 10 tablespoons of a buffalo seasoning with some sodium into that OMAD meal, 1 scoop of Energized Reds, 1 scoop of Relight in the morning, 1 scoop of the Myoscience, which interestingly enough has more potassium than sodium. So I salt my meal pretty heavily. I've been putting 10 grams of salt, 10 grams of Redmond Real Salt, as you see, on that OMAD meal. So I've been having that Myoscience drink post-meal to simply give myself some potassium along with the upgraded potassium that I'm using throughout the day to kind of level out those ratios a little bit between the sodium bolus I'm getting in that meal and the electrolytes I'm supplementing with post-meal. As far as the element packets go, I've been doing about 3 of those a day, and then I'm doing a True Endurance pre-workout from Jonathan Shane as well, Performance Gains Nutrition, and that's got about 500 milligrams of sodium. So my total daily intake on average of sodium is consistently around about 12,500 milligrams of sodium. I'm doing about 1.5 gallons of water as well. So it's important that your ratio between sodium, potassium, and fluid is in check. So for me, about 12.5 grams of sodium, 1.5 gallons of water, and then the potassium taken in is working in pretty well for me. My electrolyte levels are staying consistent, and how that fluid is dissipated through my body is staying relatively consistent as well. So this is what a typical day of eating this week has looked like. Now, if you look at the refeed, so didn't have a competition this week, but I do have a competition here soon, so I'm continuing that refeed as you see in phase 4 of the prep protocol to just ensure that I'm dialing things in there, keeping things as consistent as possibly, and tweaking as needed based off what my feedback is looking like to adjust for the coming shows. So on this refeed meal, I kept the intake the same as the prior. So 220 grams of fat, 220 grams of protein, 20 grams of total carbs for a total of 2,940 calories. That is the same refeed as the week prior, but since I did not compete this week and I want to ensure that I'm still going into a deficit, I did not have the bolus of an extra pound of ground beef on Thursday or the extra brick on Saturday, which would be a show day typically. So I did not have those 2 days. So my calories this week were lower than they were the week prior. Once you average out that refeed intake, the average for the day is about 2,019 total calories. So definitely lower than the 2,356 that I had the week prior. The ratio winds up being about 61.8% of my calories coming from dietary fat. The refeed ratio is 67.3% of my calories coming from dietary fat. Now, what that refeed meal looks like is, let me go over here to the refeed meal. Pretty much, again, keeping it consistent with what I do, what I know works well for my body. I'm doing the 9 tablespoons of the nut pod creamer. I'm doing 5 eggs, 6 ounces of ground beef, and I did a tablespoon of ghee with my lighter, smaller meal. And then I pushed the brick back to have that with the refeed keto pizza. That was made with 20 grams of almond flour, that 1 Bell's Brownie brick there on the side, 8 ounces of 85-15 beef, 7 ounces of mozzarella cheese, 50 grams of anchovies. Again, anchovies are kind of like my secret weapon because they're delicious on that pizza, and they pack a pretty hefty dose of sodium. The electrolytes stayed the same, except I bumped the salt up to 12 grams, and then the sodium in the anchovies is quite high. There's about 3,500 milligrams of sodium in the anchovies, which made my total sodium intake for the day about 16,000 milligrams. Now, let's talk about that for a little bit. When I woke up on Saturday morning, which is what a show day would fall on, I was 158.5. On Friday, it's 155.9. When I woke up, I kind of made a note of this in here. I woke up a little bit puffier than normal, a little bit more subcutaneous fluid in between my muscle tissue and the skin. So that told me that I had a little bit too much sodium as a bolus on that day from a timing or total quantity standpoint. Now, I trained on Saturday, had a full-blown workout, felt great, felt powerful, and by the end of the training itself forced that subcutaneous fluid into the muscle tissue, so I looked full, I looked vascular, I did not look puffy, I looked great post-training, but that was a full-blown workout. I'm not going to have the opportunity to do a full-blown workout on an actual show day. Yes, I'll have some time to do some pumping up before stepping on stage, but that will not likely, correlate directly with what I'm getting from a full-blown training session. So that tells me that I probably need to decrease the sodium a little bit on the actual peak week refeed, so I don't wake up with that subcutaneous fluid in my system, or I need to just have a longer pump-up session, or a combination of the two on the actual training day, or show day rather. So with this next trial refeed I've got coming up in the coming week, I'm probably going to increase my food intake a little bit, probably about another 10 grams of both protein and fat, but then drop my sodium by a relatively conservative amount, 500 to 1,000 milligrams, to see if I can wipe out that additional subcutaneous fluid and just wake up feeling a little bit crisper. So rather than having the 16,000 milligrams of sodium on Friday, this coming Friday, I'll probably drop that down to about 15,000 milligrams or so to see if I can just tighten that up a little bit. The additional food I'll be getting in will fill me out, but I don't need to be quite as aggressive with the sodium. So that's something to take note of there. The in-body scan is still showing consistent at 3%. I'm going to get a DEXA scheduled for later this month, so we'll see what the DEXA shows. I definitely anticipate a lower reading than what I got the last time I did a DEXA, which I think was like 5.1 or 5.3 or 5.5%. That was a few months back now, so I have no doubt that that will be lower. I'm a little bit curious about the in-body, though. Like, it's just holding steady at 3%, even if my weight changes or if I can tell that I'm noticeably leaner. So I'm kind of curious if that particular in-body I have is just like bottomed out at 3%. Like, no matter what, it's not going to show less than 3%. So I don't know. But I'll keep getting the DEXAs. I'm going to get some updated blood panels here before too awful long as well. And I'll keep doing the caliper test. And the caliper test has all been trending downward. So I feel pretty good about that. Let's dive into some posing footage. So this footage is actually taken post-workout on Saturday after I had allowed time for that fluid in my subcutaneous layer to absorb into the muscle tissue. So this is when I'm looking and feeling full and vascular without any puffiness. So this is an ideal look at this point in the prep. So again, let's just dive into this footage. Again, post-refeed, Saturday morning. The refeed was on Friday night. I had it later than I normally would. I had it at about 7, actually I had about 8 p.m., which is later than I would typically have it. That could explain some of the fluid retention as well. But here it is post-training Saturday morning. So I got my front lat spread there. Lots more definition in my quads. Feel good about that. And one thing I've been doing on these side poses is it's rather uncomfortable to do, but really arcing my body to the side to show off the obliques instead of the rib cage. So it feels very unnatural, but really kind of twisting your whole torso towards the judges, or in this case the camera, is key. So those are the symmetry rounds. Going into the muscular rounds here, I got my front lat spread. And again, the footage does not do the vascularity justice. The vascularity does not really come through in these clips, but when I take the pictures, I can really see the difference. And just looking in the mirror, I can see the difference in the vascularity. But the video footage does show the separation, which is good. So much more separation throughout the quads and the hamstring, the glutes, the shoulder caps there. Kind of been tweaking my classic side tricep pose there as well. You can see me kind of getting that Christmas tree action coming in. This is where you could really see the hamstrings coming in too. From these back poses, the back lat spread, the back double bicep, hamstring definition is looking on point. So I feel really good about that. Here is the side chest from the right side. And honestly, I've always favored the right side chest over the left side chest, but this prep, I've actually brought up my left hamstring quite a bit, and I'm feeling more and more confident with that left side pose. So I feel good about that. Going into my signature pose here, feel good about that. And then we got the hands overhead abdominal thigh. One thing I do need to work on is holding these poses for longer. I got a little winded up on stage last weekend amongst the other competitors, just, cycling through these different poses for the judges, cycling through it here. That's my routine. I'm not going to show you that yet. You have to wait for that one. But cycling through the poses, here on video in practice, I'm cycling through them pretty quick. But you need to be able to hold those poses for minutes sometimes. I've been up on stage battling it out with the other competitors for the judges for north of 20 minutes on more than one occasion. And if you're just simply going through the poses and hitting them for a second or two, then going to the next pose, that's not really going to do your body justice for what you're going to experience on stage. So now that I'm getting more confident with my routine, which again, I'm not going to show you quite yet, I feel like I'm going to focus more attention on actually just hitting those mandatory poses, the symmetry poses, the muscular poses, and then holding them for a minute or more before transitioning so that I can simply have the proper mind-muscle connection and really get things dialed in so that when I do step on stage and I'm battling it out, I'm not going to be the one that's sweating, breathing hard, not having control of my core, because all that work will be done. So that's a little word to the wise there. Now, I figured I'd kind of take a little bit of time here since I got all these professional photos back from the photographer, and we'll just dive into some of these comparison round shots from this past OCB show. So let's just kind of cycle through some of these here. A lot of these are just of me, and I kind of want to show you me against the others. So let's do that here. We've got some poses here. Okay, so again, this gentleman here, Mike, he is an amazing guy. He is the one that beat me in this past competition with classic bodybuilding. And again, to recap, if you haven't seen week 22, that was a montage of the entire peak week and the show itself, the results. So go back and watch that if you haven't. But just to recap, I had to cross over and do classic division because there was not enough competitors in bodybuilding. I didn't want to win by default. So I decided to cross over and do classic. And the judges did not award the competitor with the leanest, biggest build, which was me. I think you will see that in these photos. They wanted to go for a softer look for the classic division instead of the harder, more conditioned look of the bodybuilding division, which I respect. But I wanted to, for y'all's sake and transparency, just show you some of the other competitors up against me here so you can see with your own eyes what some of these differences look like. So again, Mike, not to take anything away from him, he's a freaking awesome guy, very upstanding young man, very young in the sport. He's got a great future with the sport, so keep killing it, Mike, if you're watching this. I don't want any of this to come across as negative or derogatory towards him or any of the other competitors because they all looked amazing. But here he is, and you can see that I just have a little bit more muscle maturity. I forget how old he said he was, but I'm a little bit older, I think he said he was like early 20s maybe. I don't think he's more than 25, so I've been training for longer. I've just got a little more muscle density and maturity. This guy's got some crazy developed legs. He just didn't come in quite as conditioned, but this guy's legs are out of this world. Let's see if we can just scroll through some of these poses here. So this gentleman here, I believe he said he was 54 years old. So like I brought more size and conditioning than him, but he is 54 years old. So massive hats off and congrats to him for stepping on stage and looking absolutely phenomenal. He looked incredible. So hats off to him for sure. Let's see here. We got a side chest pose. And then here's another shot amongst all of us. So you can see I've just, like these two guys, again, not taking anything away from them, but they did not have the conditioning that I had. I mean, you've got more separation. You've got more feathering in the quads here than the other competitors. Massive build quality, like good size on these gentlemen, just not the level of conditioning. The gentleman that's 54 years old brought the house down with his conditioning, though. He looks great. I want to get some back poses in. Okay, so we're getting into back poses here. Okay, so back double bicep. Again, you can just see that I've got more muscle density than these other competitors. I mean, look at the size difference in the arms versus this gentleman here. And then just more density throughout the back on my frame. A little bit more conditioning in the lower back here than the other individual. And then more definition, you know, and more size on my hamstrings than the other individual here. Let's see here. I want to try and get into some of these. Okay, so we got a hands over head abdominal thigh. That kind of showcases some of the difference in obliques. But again, I can't really take anything away from this guy's level of conditioning, and especially at 54, massive hats off to him. Let me go into a different album here. There's 5 different albums from the photographer. I had to throw the splits in there. So we didn't have the ability to do our actual routines at this show. We just kind of did a T-walk or I-walk to house music that they played. So I just kind of waltzed out there and hit a few poses. But I had to hit them with that split signature pose there, and they all liked that, which was cool. I think I've got one album here that showcases the other competitors quite a bit. Let's see here. Not that one. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is the entire lineup. How many was there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us in total. And again, looking at this front relaxed pose, Mike looks incredible. He's got the height on me. This guy's got all kinds of size. So does this individual here, but not quite the level of conditioning, but definitely rocking the house from a size standpoint, just not that conditioning. All right, so here's one thing that I need to work on. So in the transitions, I'm taking a breath of air before I hit the actual pose. But like when I'm taking that breath of air, I need to still keep my core tight, you know. So this is why it's good to analyze these pictures. Ideally, you obviously are judged when you're hitting the pose, but you want to maintain control of your physique throughout the entire time. So here I am letting my midsection distend as I take a breath, and I should not do that. So I have to be conscious of that as I'm transitioning through these poses. Here we are actually hitting the side chest pose. I'm trying to throw a little bit of a classic variation on it by holding my hands like such to kind of, you know, be more in line with that classic division. And again, you could just see, again, this guy's legs are freaking massive, but not quite as conditioned. But I mean, he's got bigger legs than I do. But generally speaking, my legs from a size and conditioning standpoint are on par there. And then let's see here, more side chest. And then we got the back pose here. So here I am, and you could really see the hamstrings. So I just want to kind of draw y'all's attention to the hamstrings on this shot. If you look at all the other competitors, you know, my hamstrings are just leaner. Like there's more separation in the hamstrings there. And then when you look at the actual back, you know, I've got feathering in my lower lumbar region, which you don't really see across the board here. And from a size standpoint, you know, I've got the size there as well. You look at the bicep peak. So from a conditioning and size standpoint, I was the leanest, biggest, most built guy on stage. But again, that's not what the judges were looking for with this particular show. They had me move to the other side of the stage for the other panel or other side of judges. So here I am now on this side of the stage. And you can again see the definition, the separation, the hamstrings, and the lower back development. Here I am next to Mike. So again, this is the individual that placed higher than me. You can see the difference in the back. I just have a little bit more size and separation, but he's got that height on me, and he's got a good classic physique. I mean, he's got a physique that is very quintessential of that classic division, and they awarded that with this go around. So again, this is why this is a subjective sport, and you can't ever go in expecting it all. Another back double bicep pose. They didn't have us do side tricep poses, which was interesting. They had us do our favorite our favorite classic pose. Here I am doing kind of my signature pose. I did this same Arnold pose, but they didn't capture that on film, unfortunately, which is unfortunate because I don't typically do that pose, but it looked really good when I saw some pictures that Crystal had taken. So that's pretty much a couple shots of me and the other competitors. Hopefully that sheds some light on what the judges were looking for, what it looks like on stage. It's funny, you get backstage, you're starting to size people up, and you're like, man, that guy's big, that guy's, lean. You get a little nervous, but you can't really see everything from a full picture until you see the actual pictures. I didn't really know what to expect. Everybody looks bigger when they're backstage, especially when they're all bundled up. You don't really know what's coming. Then they take the hoodie off, the sweater off, the sweats off, and that kind of showcases what they're bringing to the table. But again, you don't ever really know. You don't know what the judges are looking for. You don't know what the other competitors are going to be looking like. You just got to go in and be the best you can be. So that's a little recap on this past week's, macros and nutritional manipulation, sodium tweaks, refeed tweaks, and also since I just got these professional photos back from the OCB photographer, I wanted to showcase that to y'all as well. So that's a wrap on week 23. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for week 24. I'm actually leaving for the next show next week, so we'll be heading out on Sunday for New York. That's where the first INBF WNBF Federation show is, and I will see y'all for that recap then.